thank you to our sponsors. With all of that being said, we are here today for cybersecurity. We're super excited to have Alec on board. And Alec, I'm going to go ahead and just hand it over to you to give a little intro about yourself and get us started.
Perfect. So the intro will be like one slide in, I think. So first, thanks for joining the call. Specifically, I know Bonnie, correct? And then Mara, and then Scott. It's good to see everyone on. Hopefully we get some good virtual attendance as well at some point, but because really when I want to drive this is a conversation rather than just presentation. So got a little bit of lag, it looks like, on slides, so we'll just go manual. Okay, so who am I? So I live in Carbondale. Lived all over the country, but my wife and I settled here about 2 years ago. And for the past 10 plus years or so, I've been doing a mix of offensive and defensive cyber operations. So defending people most of the time, and then did some work in the government where we were doing the offensive work, which was pretty interesting. So I've got a pretty diverse background that I bring, and happy to have really any type of discussions with folks about cyber operations, because it's a passion of mine. Did my undergrad at the University of Illinois, and then finished it up with a master's at Johns Hopkins. And I'm currently a partner at the Stapers Group, which is a small consulting firm based here in Carbondale. I also have a role with VMware Carbon Black as a director of security. And then I'm in the Marine Corps Reserves, basically all doing the same role, just for different organizations. So really what I want to talk to everyone today about, and like I said, I want it to be a discussion just to make sure it's value added for you, is the importance of cybersecurity and the role that it plays in all businesses and all organizations for that matter. So we'll start out with the bottom line up front, and we'll include a healthy dose of attention getter to help everyone understand the role and the importance of cybersecurity. Even if you think it doesn't affect you, chances are it almost certainly does. I want you to help you understand what threats are out there and how to be informed of them, not in a way to create fear, or in the security world, there's this term called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's not what we're trying to do here, but just trying to make sure that everyone is accurately informed of what the potential threats are out there. Then we'll go into how to defend the individual, how to defend a small business and startups, and then lastly, how to ask the right questions as an investor or even as a senior management of an organization to better understand your organization's security posture. And ground rules, like I said in the top right, I'd like this to be a discussion. So Bonnie, Mara, Scott, please stop me at any time, ask questions. If this isn't what you came here for and you're looking for something else security related, awesome. Pitch that to me. I'd love to call it an audible. Really what I want this to be is value added for you, and not just me talking out into the internet and Zoom call for another time. So I'd like it to be short on slides. I'll try to go through it pretty quick, and long on Q&A, but I think because we're doing a recorded session, it'll likely go full length on the slides. I think we're scheduled for an hour. It by no means will take that long. So let's just jump into it. Real quick, I guess, anybody on the line right now have a question up front or anything that you specifically like to see discussed today? All right, nothing heard. So kicking in the bottom line up front. So what I want everybody to understand right off the bat is you are a target for some sort of cyber threat, whether you realize it or whether you acknowledge it or not. And I say that, again, not to create fear, but just to make sure that you're aware of this world that you interact with, that you play on the internet, you work on the internet, everything's great, but there are threats out there that you need to realize that you're exposed to. And that security, although it may seem like the realm of the IT nerds and the geeks and the computer folks, it's really not. Security is, if you're talking to an engineering group, it's a key function of reliability. And if you're talking to more management, it's a key element of risk management. And it's essential to businesses of all types, all sizes, and a basic level of protection, right? Like you don't need an advanced amount of protection, a basic amount will have a disproportionate benefit for your business or your organization. And then lastly, security can be infinitely complex, right? Like I've been doing it for 10 plus years and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface on it. There's a tremendous amount there, but it doesn't have to be complex for the average person to get a tremendous amount of benefit and the ability to protect themselves. So going right into a quick scenario, I'd like everyone just to think about this for a second. So you arrive at work one day and you're locked out of your computer. You try logging in, you keep getting rejected. You find out that all your data is encrypted. You can't access it. Same thing's happening for your coworkers. What do? No, we don't have many people on here, but I'm sure many people have faced this, whether it's on the call or not. What you're probably seeing here is something called a ransomware attack that has hit individuals. It hits businesses. I mean, if you talk to and familiar with the local Carbondale Police Department, they see about 3 calls a week related to some sort of electronic crime, some of which are ransomware, some of which are just phone scams. But people get hit by this all the time. And you see it in big businesses as well. So what I want you to think is, even though you're not an IT business, even though you're not in heavy tech sector, what would happen if you can't access it? So some more questions to jog this scenario. What would you do? Do you know who you would call? Do you know what your first steps would be? Ransoms can be pretty expensive. We'll take a round number and say 100K, which isn't unrealistic. Can your company afford to pay 100K ransom? Wasn't expected. You didn't budget for it. Chances are you don't have 100K lying around somewhere. What does that do to your business? Is it an existential threat to your company? How are you able to operate and continue doing your job if you can't get on your computer for, say up to 4 weeks or more? Again, it's not just technology companies that need to worry about this. We've seen it with construction companies that got locked out of their computers. They're down hard for however long it takes before they get back up. And then lastly, let's say, everything goes well and you have the money, you pay the ransom. What happens if you don't get your data back, right? So by paying the ransom, you're relying on the honor of a criminal who, chances are, in some instances, even if you pay up, they don't give you the data, or if they do, they can just come back in later and do the same thing when they hit you up for some more money down the road. So I bring this up because usually this gets a good response out of people, and they have a holy crap moment, and we should do something. Now what should we do? We'll get into that more later. But if we haven't made it clear on why you should care, here's some statistics at you. For you. So 43% breaches occur for small businesses. And we've got another report that says roughly half have been breached within the last year. You hear about Capital One, you hear about Equifax, you hear about Sony. There's a lot of very small businesses out there, or I should say, there's a lot of small businesses out there that are impacted that you never hear about unless you're intimately involved in that business. And then the average duration of an attack is about 50 days. So when we start talking about how long can you be locked out of your computer for, is 50 days acceptable? Is that something that you've planned for? And then lastly, we said 100K on the previous slide. There's a lot, the numbers can vary depending on the size of the organization and what the criminal is asking. But the average cyber attack is costing businesses 200K. So whether that's in paying a ransom, whether that's bringing in an incident response team, like the experts to basically come in and clean up the mess, it's not cheap for businesses. So again, a little bit of prevention goes a long way. We'll talk about that more in a bit.
I have a question.
Yeah, hit.
So paying a ransom to a criminal who's already stole or locked you out of your system, who won't probably give you your data back, I mean, is that common practice to pay a ransom?
It really depends on who you talk to. So it is common practice. Whether or not it's the best practice is up for debate. So some people will say, just pay it, and then on the back end, you do everything you can to secure your system to prevent them from coming back in again. Some folks will say, out of principle, like we don't negotiate with criminals. Like we're not going to pay it. It's really just depends on your situation. So some companies will have robust backup systems. So if they say, hey, they crashed our entire production environment and they encrypted all the data, but we have a backup system that is intact. Our data is backed up last week. It might take us 2 weeks to recover from this, but we can recover from it. It's not going to be something that drops us hard indefinitely. So it really just depends on who you talk to, and the likelihood of, if you pay, will they give you the data or not, is anybody's guess. I mean, it can go either way. These things are so situational independent, and it just comes down to a risk decision on your part. Is it a risk that you're willing to take to pay the ransom? Is it a risk that you're willing to pay to not pay the ransom? It's just, internal discussions that the organization need to be had in order to determine the right way ahead. So does that answer your question, Bonnie? Awesome. Okay, so the evil you see versus the evil you don't. So if someone were to, so I live in Carbondale. This is a little map of Carbondale. If someone wanted to break in my house, they would have to have physical access to my house. They would have to drive to Carbondale. They would have to find my address. Oh, hey, that's an unlocked door on the cute little yellow house in the corner. I'll go into that. The number of people who are willing to do that in the Carbondale area, I like to think is very, very small, right? We have a safe community. There's really not that many people. If there's a bad actor, I can see you, I can be suspicious of you, and there's cops right down the street that can come by that know how to handle a common robber. Physical threats can be mitigated. I put up a fence, I lock my door, that takes care of it. But when you go on the internet, the reality is you're exposed to the entire world, right? So physical threats in Carbondale, somebody has to be at my house to break in. If I'm on the internet, anybody on the entire globe can come into my network and potentially be a threat. So somebody from China, somebody from Russia, somebody from Pakistan, somebody from Nigeria, anybody across the globe that has an internet connection, chances are they can reach out and touch me and potentially break into my computer. So the threat landscape opens dramatically when you start talking about the difference between physical threats and cyber threats. So even though you're in your quaint, small Colorado Western Slope town, it does not mean that the world cannot potentially target you. So a lot of times we get a question of, well, why would they target me? You know, you're right. The world is vast. I'm just one small person. I don't have a strong social media account. I'm not the CEO of a major company. Why would you target me? And to describe this, I want to look at the two different types of targets broadly. So one's a deliberate target. So this is, I am the attacker. I am specifically targeting you, Johnny, because you are the CTO of a major tech company. And I know that if I break into your account, I can get some trade secrets. Or I know, you know, Annie is a multimillionaire. If I break into her account and I can somehow get access to her bank account, there's a lot of money there I can get. So that's a very deliberate attack. I am identifying a specific target and tailoring my approach. That's tailoring my approach to that target. You're probably not one of those unless somebody on this line is a high roller and we don't know about it. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Chances are you're probably falling in the second category, which is the opportunistic. Think of this very much as, you know, I'm not looking to rob somebody in particular, but I'm walking down the street and I see a front door wide open and there's some, you know, a diamond necklace sitting right there on the ground. I don't know who you are. I don't really care. You present a potential source of income for me. That's good enough. And that's effectively how most people get attacked on the internet. It's not deliberate. If it's deliberate, you know, there's an additional approach that we can take with you. Opportunistic is really where we're going to focus today. And again, that's most likely what the target's going to be if you're a West Sloper. I don't know if that's a term or not, but I've just thrown it out there. So going in a couple lame excuses for not protecting yourself, because we get these all the time until somebody gets attacked and then they're very, very interested in security. So one is, I'm not a computer person, right? Like, hey, you know, I'm not good with computers. I can barely turn it on in the morning sometimes. How am I expected to protect myself? I like to think about this as like, hey, I'm not an accountant. So like, so what? I can't pay my taxes. Like, you expect me to pay my taxes? I'm not an accountant. Like, give me a break. So that's not a valid excuse. If you use a computer, you have the requisite skill set to really provide some basic level of protection for yourself. I don't have the budget or the expertise. We're not working with vast budgets here on the Western Slope for the most part. We don't have a huge bullpen of security folks out here that can work with you. I just don't know what to do. And I don't have the money to acquire that skill. Who would target me? I'm too small. Hopefully we already put that one to rest. Doesn't matter how small you are. If you have money, you're a target. And then lastly, don't worry. I use a VPN, a virtual private network. I use an antivirus. People can't hack in because I already have defenses against it. I use a Mac. Nobody hacks in the Macs. We all know that. Those are all excuses. It doesn't work. There's plenty of malware for Macs, and neither VPNs or antiviruses are a silver bullet. They're both important aspects to a security system, but they're not going to save you from everything. So hopefully this has been conveyed already, but I really want you to think about security as a business function, just like anything else, just like accounting, your bookkeeping, just like your marketing strategy. Security needs to be something you're thinking about, because ultimately it is a key component of risk management. And if you talk to anybody who's on a board of directors, if you talk to anybody who's in an executive staff, risk management is their business. Risk management isn't just the domain of the IT folks who are sitting in the server closet, you know, on the other end of the building. It is the direct business of that person and anybody else using a computer, and especially the folks making the key strategic decisions at the highest level. And again, it's not on the slide, but if you're an engineer and you're building an application, you're running an infrastructure, reliability is huge to you. And if your system isn't secure, it can't be reliable. We'll go into more of that later. So let's look at how, oh, Bonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question, sorry.
Yep.
So we have a company here that comes to mind called Manitou, and they're creating a product that essentially protects PII or consumer information with third parties, but it's not a very widely distributed product yet. So like, what do we do to protect sensitive information that's handled, excuse me, and stored by like third party vendors? Because you just said at the beginning, you say all these places get hacked and then all your information's out there. I mean, is there anything for the consumer to do? I mean, what kind of mediation efforts do we have?
Yeah, so if you're the consumer and you're giving your data out, the biggest thing you can do is be stingy with who you give your information to. You know, if you see, even if it's a legitimate website, you shouldn't just pass around your information all willy-nilly, like unfortunately a lot of folks do, because it just opens up the exposure that you have. I would say research whoever you're going to give your information to if it's not already evident. Like if I'm giving my data to Capital One, for example, or some major banking institution, I can readily assume that they're taking some safeguards to protect it, right? Like their business model is collapses if security isn't and security isn't there to build that trust. As an organization, it takes. We can go into what an organization can do to protect third-party information, help secure their data that's going to a third party. A lot of it, though, is building information, scrutinizing the organizations that you're sending the data to, like you would at an individual level. And then there's even some contract vehicles that you can use to help push that company into more secure practices, or at least potentially even hold them liable if a breach does occur. So it's really situationally dependent. There's some principles that you can look at that we'll talk through here in a bit. It's really having a conversation and understanding, one, having the awareness that if you are giving your data out, what data is being distributed and who is it going to, how is it being used, and then asking the question, how is it being protected? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I just saw Adam jumped on there. Adam, feel free to at any point to throw a question in chat. It's an open conversation, so.
Welcome, Adam.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll go into how to protect yourself as an individual, and know that by protecting yourself as an individual, if you're a small consulting firm, legal firm, you only have 1 to 5 people, and it's not something that you're collecting a tremendous amount of data from your customers, you can pretty much treat them as a consolidated form of individuals, right? Like you can treat it really the same way. So how do you protect yourself as an individual? There's a term in security called hard targets and soft targets. Soft targets, that is the house with the door open. They've got their brand new MacBook sitting on the porch, unprotected. They're just begging to be robbed, right? And then a hard target is somebody that has locked front door. They have a security camera. They've got some standoff distance between them and where public places are at. There's some other things you can do to protect it, but basically you look at that house and you're like, I don't want to rob that house. That other house is the one I want to go after. You want to be the house that they don't want to rob. And there's some things you can do that in the virtual world. So one, know that your wireless access points, your Wi-Fi routers, they're vulnerable. So are you creating a home network? If you have a public space and your business has a network for just the average consumer or customer to use, is that protected? Is it guarded against your corporate network? If it's not, you need to do that. If it's your home router, do you have a password on it? Is it a strong password? And strong passwords we can get into, but basically it's 15 characters or more. I think we're at 15 characters now. I may have moved up to 16. Basically, as hacking techniques get more sophisticated, the number of characters required needs to basically be increased in order to protect yourself. But basically, strong passwords, do you rotate them routinely? Or do you just say, well, Cedar Networks or now Ting or Comcast or Xfinity, they gave me this router, it had this password on it, good enough for me. It hasn't broken for the last 4 years, so I guess I'll keep using it. Wrong answer. You need to change those things. You need to update your devices regularly, right? So if you're talking to a large enterprise and you say update your devices, that can kind of freak some IT folks up, because anybody who's managed a large enterprise network knows that when you update things, there's a good chance that some things could break and that could ruin your weekend. If it's me on my Surface Pro right now, or it's you on your MacBook or you with your iPhone, chances are if you update it, it's not going to break anything that's not recoverable. Like it's when companies push out updates, some of them for performance, yes, but there's often some sort of security element to that update that's patching a vulnerability that existed within that product. So update regularly. From a story from when we were used to do offensive operations and we were breaking into bad guys' computers, we didn't have to do anything fancy to get in. We could basically say, these guys are using this operating system. They haven't updated it in 4 years. We know that all these vulnerabilities have been disclosed between now and then are fair game. It's pretty easy to get in. If you update that phone or that computer, you usually get kicked off pretty fast. So know that updating your computer regularly, your devices regularly, or your apps regularly is extremely important. Next, it's something you've probably heard before, but I'm going to foot stomp it again. Strong passwords. Don't reuse passwords. Use a password manager to increase complexity. Password managers present their own, vulnerability to it, but it's better than the alternative. Most people use the same 1 or 2 passwords on everything. If one account gets compromised, it's very easy to exploit the other passwords. If you want to look into it more and understand what some real world examples are, there are, I believe it was Michael Brennan, who, when he was the director of the CIA, I forget what accounts got broken into, but basically one small little e-commerce site that he was using got compromised, and they were able to move from that to another website, eventually to his email. And once you get in the email, you pretty much have the keys to the castle. So strong passwords, use different ones each time. Use a password generator so you don't have to memorize them. It's pretty dummy proof with a little bit of practice. And then next, practice safe emailing and web browsing. If you're going to a site that looks like it's sketchy, it's probably sketchy. If it's, even browsers now like Chrome, I think Edge and Safari and everybody else, they have some little icon at the top. If you go to a website and it flashes red because it's showing that it's not secure, you probably shouldn't go there unless you have a very good reason to. A lot of folks go on to shady websites because they want to, I love UFC and MMA. Sometimes I want to pay for the pay-per-view, so I'll go to a pirated website that's streaming it live. Chances are that's not a good move, right? Like that's going, you're going into a place where you can catch some viruses, and it's very easy to do so. So if you see something very, very convenient, and it probably shouldn't be that convenient, chances are you're getting into some stuff. And then on your emails, if you get an email with a link and you have no idea who it comes, please don't click it. If you get an email from somebody that you know, like Adam sends me an email, Adam and I have a good relationship, but when I open it, the tone of language doesn't look like Adam. I have no idea why he'd be emailing me last night at midnight. Be sketchy, like understand that maybe Adam's a good dude, yeah, but he may have been hacked too, and his website, his email address may now be compromised. So, for example, I don't know many folks my age, I'm 32, who send chain emails like were all the rage back in AOL days, but my dad still sends those. So when he sends them to me, I call him up every time and say, hey, stop sending me this stuff. This is a way for hackers to get into your computer. If I get a random email from him and it doesn't have any context, I immediately call the person and say, hey, what did you send that for me for? Diligence, it goes a very, very long way. And then lastly, install some sort of antivirus or anti-malware on your computer. That can be any brands out there. You can get some for free. You can get some, you pay, $60, $80 a year, depending on what it is. They don't solve all your problems, but they do protect you from most known attacks. Again, when we look at security, the way that if you wanted to break this down into one sentence, it would say defense in depth. So there's no silver bullet. You build in layers of security so that if one gets compromised, they get stopped at the next. If that one gets compromised, they get stopped at the next. It's not just they hack one element of your network and they get in and they have rights to everything. So for the folks online, does this make sense? Is there anything here that you have any questions about or you'd like me to expand on?
No, it all makes sense. There's a lot of emails and things where I've got a secondary password verification and all that. So anytime, I access my Gmail from an alternative device, et cetera, as well too. You see that that's becoming more prevalent? And do you see any, fallacies or potential threats with that?
Yeah, so two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is huge. Most emailing services and most applications that have some sort of sensitive data associated with it. So think like a banking app, they'll have the option, either the option or even maybe on your bank, they force you to now use two-factor authentication. That's huge. If you're familiar with that 2FA or MFA, two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, use it. Anybody who has anything sensitive that's in a production environment for a company almost certainly has multi-factor authentication enabled. So yeah, it's an easy win. It can sure stop a lot of attacks though. So again, not a silver bullet, but definitely a worthy control to put in place to protect yourself. Thanks for bringing that up, Adam. Nice. Okay. So like I said, this is great for an individual. This is great for a small business that only has a handful of people and doesn't have a tremendous amount of sensitive data. But what does protecting yourself look like if you're a smaller company? What does it look like if you have more assets? What happens if you're collecting customer data? We can't go through the full details of it just because so much of it's situationally dependent, but we're going to go through a quick framework that may help you. So the first step is categorizing your assets. And probably even before that, it's knowing what your assets are. Bonnie, to your question earlier, do you know what your data is? Do you know where it's going? Do you know how it's being used? You got to understand the basics before you can start trying to do anything with them. Do you know how many laptops are in your company? How many devices are logging into your network on a daily basis? A lot of companies and smaller companies typically don't have this problem because they just, if you're operating out of one room altogether, you can just turn your head in 360 degrees and say, oh, okay, there's everything. Got it. Pretty easy. But in a larger enterprise that goes through tech refreshes, multiple sites, it can be very difficult to understand what you actually have, both from a physical asset, so like laptops, phones, servers, to virtual assets. So what data do I have? Where is it stored? How is it encrypted? How is it protected? So you got to identify it first, and you have to categorize it. Once you understand what all your assets are, you need to start looking at what the threats are and then selecting controls to protect it. So think of a control as anything you put in place to mitigate a risk. So can you eliminate the risk? That would be fantastic. Can you at least mitigate it and reduce the severity of the risk? That's what you're trying to do when you select the controls. And part of that is budget based, right? So I'm not ignorant to say that every company is going to have infinite budget they can spend on security. That's very, very far from the reality. The best is just to understand what can we spend, and by knowing what you have and categorizing your assets and understanding the business impact of if you lose an asset, that'll allow you to prioritize those dollars a lot better. And then once you select your controls, you implement them. So how do you actually throw them on your network? How do you actually you install a VPN? Great, that's taking care of a certain type of attack. You have your anti-malware, antivirus. You have your 2FA or 3 MFA or multi-factor, like Adam brought up. Great, you now implemented that. Now, once you've implemented it, you have to assess it. So Adam implemented two-factor authentication on his email. Test it. Does it actually work or does it not? Like you just implemented it. Turns out, maybe you're like me and you fat fingered your phone number. And when you go to log into your email, it sends it to somebody who has a totally different phone number than you. You need to assess that control to make sure it's actually implemented properly. And there's some more sophisticated ways you can do this by actually having an attacker or a a white hat hacker or a red team or a pen tester, whatever terms you want to use, to actually try to break into your network and see if that control works. That's probably outside the budget for most folks, but that is an option that's out there. And then you have some sort of authorization. So who owns the network? Is it the CIO? Is it the CTO, depending on what the organization is? Mostly it's the CIO. Do they say, hey, I see the security plan. This is good. I authorize it. This is right. If we do get hacked, my butt's on the line. I authorize that this system and with this security plan is solid. And then you monitor those controls, because just because you implement a control on day 1 doesn't mean it's going to be effective on day 90 or day 180. Things change, and you need to continuously monitor those controls to make sure they're right. And just like you can see, this is a cycle. So just because you do it once doesn't mean it's done. Some sort of periodic review is often necessary. So there's a lot of Q&A that we can go into about specific businesses. We don't have a ton of folks on the line, and let me check how we're doing with time. We're doing fine with time. If anybody has any questions on this, I'm happy to go through it. There's some good resources that we'll provide at the end that can kind of help you go through this process on your own. No cost, just a good exercise that you guys can go through. It doesn't take that much time. It's almost like a wizard build out. So it's pretty easy to use. So before we move on to the next one, I just want to pause. Are there any questions?
So I'm a finance person. This is totally out of my wheelhouse. Interesting though. So let's say you do all your information stolen, all your data stolen. Is there such thing as like cybersecurity insurance? I mean, is that?
There is actually, yeah. It's relatively new, and by relatively new, I think it was first being discussed maybe, at least I heard it discussed 2 to 3 years ago, maybe. So it's out there, but it's very, I've heard mixed results with it. And I shouldn't even say mixed results. Most of the experiences haven't been positive because there are so many variables that are at play that are required for an insurance company to say, hey, we think that you have done your due diligence to protect yourself and now insure you up to a certain dollar amount. Most companies, when you come down to this cycle, they get stopped at categorize your assets. And they don't actually ever do a deep dive on it and actually understand what all their network is. And as they go through the cycle, they may protect everything except for 3 devices in their entire network. And then when the attacker comes, they see the hard targets, they avoid those. They see the soft targets, or the ones you didn't target, they attack that. I've seen questions where, in an investigation, it'll show, well, company, I'm the insurance company. You didn't protect these assets like you were supposed to in your contract. We're not going to reimburse you. This was preventable. You should have prevented this. So there is insurance, and we can take that offline if you have specific questions on it, Bonnie, just because that can quickly go down a rabbit hole that's a little bit goofy. So, but great question though. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, it's definitely probably a hard thing to prove. Another question, if as a business owner, like what resources would you point us to stay up to date on like the most like reliable non-BS resources to stay up to date on the most harmful cybersecurity threats? Where should we go to read and stay updated?
Yeah. So it gets into a domain called threat intelligence. So I'd say a lot of people likely don't have the time to go through the full level of let me stay up to date with the latest threats. What I would say is if you wanted to get in there, I can definitely point you to resources that provide some level of free threat intelligence. A lot of it comes out of the government, which is decent. Usually commercials a little bit ahead of them, or at least what's reported. The biggest thing you can do is just update your devices. So Microsoft's security team should definitely be better at security than John and Jane here in Carbondale who are running a small business. If they're tracking threats ahead of Microsoft, then they should probably quit whatever they're doing and go work for a threat intelligence team and make a whole bunch of money. So what I would say is if you update regularly, you're relying on the folks whose job it is day on and stay on to track the threats, mitigate them, and push out patches to their software to make sure that their customers aren't vulnerable. So I by no means want to stiff arm that question. It just, I think the amount of time, like we've got folks that are at one of my jobs with VMware Carbon Black, massive organization. We have a big security team. Even then you have guys who aren't just tracking what the known vulnerabilities are, they're actually actively going out and trying to break things to determine unknown vulnerabilities that we could be at risk of. So I know that doesn't answer your question directly, but does it kind of speak to the intent of your question?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you for that. Nice. Okay, so to the next slide, and this will be really the last content slide before we kind of just go into other topics that we can talk about at some later point, and you can reach out to me directly on it. Is trying to be cute with my titles here, so hopefully they're somewhat interesting. So picking a good egg. One thing that we work with some local investors here, and one thing that has increased in awareness is the role of cybersecurity as a business function, like we've talked about, and the necessity for boards, executives, and potential investors to understand the security of companies that they're looking to partner with or invest with. So the question that we usually throw out to them, and that I posed at the beginning of this, is can a system, service, product, company be considered truly reliable if it isn't fundamentally secure? And in this case, it doesn't just have to be from cyber threats. It can be physical ones as well. Like if you decide to build your company in a really, really shady part of town and you don't have a security, like a camera system, you don't have well-locked doors, you don't have, access control procedures, do you want to invest in that company if somebody's just going to come into the office and ransack it in the first week? Same thing with a security company. Same thing with cybersecurity within really any business. You know, if you can't protect yourself, are you a reliable investment? So I hope that helps kind of get it down to the fundamental question that we're dealing with here. Is that it's not just the technical things that we're worried about. It's ultimately, is your business reliable? And if it's not, then cyber threats can certainly pose an existential threat. Again, this isn't saying a whole bunch of fear, the sky is falling, you need to spend, you know, half your budget on security. That's not at all what I'm saying, but it is something that you should probably be taken into account for. And if you're not, I would start questioning it, and we'll go into some of those questions later. But you're increasingly seeing cybersecurity becoming a criterion in environmental, social, and governance evaluations. So when you see companies when you see investments, or you see banks who are looking at potential investments, it's not just considering, you know, the standard business metrics that they look at to evaluate an investment. They're increasingly looking at ESG and security as part of that element. And really, I want to look at just some questions that you can ask that aren't overly complex. And really, I would argue that to get a good bang for your buck, you probably even don't need to know what the right answer should be. You can probably just get a sense of it and to know if somebody's BSing you. I would obviously encourage whoever is asking these questions to be as informed as they can about what their proper answer should be. But if nothing else, I would say ask these questions, look into the person's eyes, see how they respond to it. If they're full of it and they're not giving you a straight answer, that's probably a place that you could start picking at to see if there's more there. So one is just asking your business, what's the major threat to your business? Okay, gotcha, it's competitors. What about theft? What about criminals? Have you thought about cyber criminals? Can you describe your security program for me, both physical and virtual or cyber? Let him explain it. Does it make sense? Does it sound logical? If it does, fantastic. You probably don't need to know that much about security to determine whether it sounds logical. If it sounds haphazard, you can probably get a sense of it. Again, probably someplace you should dig in a little bit more. Expanding on that security program, you know, do you have a plan for incident response? So if you get hacked, what are you doing for it? Do you have it for disaster recovery? If you get hacked, how are you recovering from it? If your basement if the basement of your business floods, how are you recovering from it? If there's a global pandemic, how do you recover from that? And then a business continuity plan. So you get hacked, certain services go down. How do you continue to operate until you fully recovered? And then lastly, when were they last tested? So you have these plans. Plans are only good if they're executable. So if you've created a incident response plan and you haven't tested it in 2 years, you only have the plan in paper. You don't actually have it. It's probably not providing that much value for you. So I tried to make this where you don't have to have a technical background to ask these questions. You don't have to have a very security-minded perspective to go into this. It should be something that the layperson can understand and ask these questions to help understand more about the posture of a company. Adam, Bonnie, just as the two folks who are online, do these make sense? Is there anything that if I've no idea what your day job is, if one of you is an investor and you say, hey, I'm looking to, you know, a potential company or startup comes to you and says, hey, we're looking for $50K in investment. I would love to pitch your, you know, investment firm or your VC fund. You know, would you feel comfortable asking these questions without thinking that, like, if they actually provide an answer back, you're just going to feel like you got caught with your pants down? Or is this something that you would feel comfortable actually asking a business?
Well, you know, running a venture fund and a loan fund, these are not questions that, and we deal with a lot of tech companies, and these are definitely questions that we should probably be asking, and are not common ones. Now, I've honestly never really asked them to know whether they're being honest or even have a plan, a disaster plan, a recovery plan, any kind of, like, you know, implemented systems in place. So definitely a very interesting set of questions that come from a way different perspective than we traditionally come from.
Perfect. And please don't assume that, even though I'm like Alec, the security guy for the purpose of this presentation, please don't think that I am this blind zealot that says, Bonnie, that's unacceptable. You need to be asking all these security questions every single time you talk to a company, or like you are at risk of going out of business. Like, absolutely not. It goes back to, like, a little bit of prevention goes a long way. if you just say, oh, cool, maybe you had this list of questions that you use to evaluate a company and that you just kind of use as a checkpoint to do due diligence, throw something security related in there. See if it gains traction, see how it responds. If it doesn't work for you, great. Maybe there's another way to do it. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a cultural shift for many people. And it's not to say that you need to do everything for security or else, you're in great danger. Just do a little bit. And if it works for you, great, expand out to it, do as much as you can. But by no means saying, you have to rewrite the entire script to be focused around security in order to be effective. So thank you for speaking to that as well. Awesome. Okay, so that really concludes the main context of it. I throw some resources up here that will be in the slide deck that we share. Bonnie, I'll probably get with you offline after this because I don't think I've uploaded it yet. But just to do a quick rundown, so the National Institute of Technology, really, I go back. All these are government resources. I use those government resources because I wanted to show that there isn't a tie to, well, yeah, you're going to get into this and you go 2 steps in and then hit a paywall and you're not going to be able to go any further. It's kind of like a trick to get you to pay. All of these are free resources. You can click on them, explore them. They're meant for folks who do not have wealth of technical expertise. You can even see for the FCC Cyber Planner Wizard, it helps you create a fairly comprehensive plan, or yes, it covers your bases, but it doesn't go in a tremendous amount of depth. That can be something great to start an initial plan that you can build from. And if nothing else, can be a conversation starter. I'll link, like I said, all these resources are linked. Explore them. More than happy, reach out to field any questions on these. If folks start them and they're like, hey, I clicked on the NIST Small Business Cybersecurity corner at first. You said it's the first place to start. I have no idea what the heck it means. Can you help me walk through this or provide a little extra context? More than happy to do this. I almost kind of view this presentation as like a public service announcement because I care about our community. I come from a national security background, and my mission there was always to protect the good folks from the bad folks. And even though I only am a weekend warrior with that now, that mission still resonates for me. So I'm trying to do whatever I can to help our community to keep them resilient and keep the bad folks from doing what they like to do. So feel free to explore these resources. Let me know what you think. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. And then also prior to the pandemic, which really, really screwed up our speaking gigs, but here we are anyway. There's a tremendous amount to cover here, and a lot of it can be very niche. So we work with companies of all sizes on whatever their specialty is, whatever's most relevant for them. I threw a laundry list up here. Basically to say, if you have questions about this, if you want to get specific, if you want to understand more steps, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk about this stuff. I am very much a jack of all trades in this. I can talk about a lot of aspects, and then I'll be honest, I'm not a good liar. If something is outside of my lane, I'm not going to BS you. But I should be able to direct you to some good resources to help you out. So just throw that up there to jog anybody's thoughts, see if it's something they're interested. And with that, again, my name is Alec Pfeiffer. I'm with the Stabers Group, and thank you for your time. So Bonnie, Adam, do you guys have any questions before we close it out?
No, I think that was great, Alex. Yeah, and I kind of appreciate perspective. It is kind of a PSA. We're not going to get into the details of it, but both from my organization, my staff, at least having that conversation piece to protect them, their assets, and frankly, whether that be IP or client information, anything that we need to protect, as well as I do work with a nonprofit, a chamber group here in the area, and I think that's important for us to establish moving forward. As you said, it's kind of something we need to be aware of moving forward because it is an increasing threat. We may not be a target today, but down the road we will be. Yeah,
and to that awareness piece, we're trying to partner with the local police departments to help put this on their radar as well. For example, not to throw them under the bus, because this is just who we are closest to. But we're in Carbondale. We talked to the Carbondale police. I asked them what happens when somebody calls you and says that they just got hacked. And they say, well, we talk to them and say, hey, we'll take a note down. But in their incident response checklist that comes up on their screen when somebody calls in, they have nothing there for electronic crime. So nothing there for a scamming call. They have nothing there for, hey, I'm a 72-year-old retiree, and I think somebody just froze all my bank accounts with some ransomware attack or something that, well, they probably wouldn't use ransom attack. I can't get into my bank account. I think somebody broke my computer. I think some criminal's trying to do something, whatever terms they're going to use. what do you do as an organization? Like if somebody broke into my house, to use a physical example, I'm calling the cops. They know exactly what to do. If I say that electronic crime was perpetrated against me, they have no idea what to do. So we're trying to work with them to build at least some literacy there and to at least know what the other public sector resources out there that help. Because the reality is if Bonnie, you were to call up the Telluride Police Department and say this happened and they do anything with it, it goes from the local police department pretty much straight to the FBI. There's really nobody in between to help you out. And I've worked with the FBI in the past. They're a great organization. Chances are they're not going to drop what they're doing across the entire country and say, absolutely, we'll be there tomorrow and start working with you. What they'll probably say is, hey, Bonnie, 2 weeks after the fact or however long it is, very unfortunate for what happened. I need you to box up all your computers that are affected and send them to the FBI for forensics. What does that do to your business? Are you like, hey, that sounds great. We're sitting on tons of cash reserve that we didn't know what to do with. We're happy to just shut down the business for the next 2 months and go ski or mountain bike or whatever while you guys sort this out. By the way, it's probably not gonna be 2 months. It's probably gonna be 6 months before they have time to do forensics. So there's plenty of private companies out there that will help you with these incident response situations, but we're trying to build the awareness in the public sector response to build their literacy and help make it more of a, I mean, so many people consider the internet a public utility. Why isn't the local government, why isn't the state government really equipped to help manage attacks against that public utility? So.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I used to be in banking and, cybercrime and any kind of fraudulent activity and scams are obviously, we're constantly being trained on, constantly, like keeping up to date, constantly protecting information. But it's such an interesting, and I love the set of questions you put in there about investors asking companies, like, what is your recovery plan? What, barriers do you have in play? Like, those aren't questions we ask as investors. We're worried about financials and projections. And it's great if you give them the money and they get past that barrier and their company's thriving. But if all their if they get hacked and all their data's gone, like, what do you do? So it's just a very interesting perspective. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I love this stuff. I'm happy to talk about it all day long. I know most times with people, it's you need the right amount of security and you really don't need anything else because your job is to evaluate the financial stability of the company, the viability of them going forward. Security needs to be part of that, but unless they're a security company, you probably don't need to fixate on it more than it's necessary. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Well, Alec and Adam, if you have any more questions, but Alec, thank you for your time. This was fascinating. And thanks for being a part of West Slope Startup Week. And we will make sure to upload this so everybody can view it. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Great. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks to you guys too.
Bye.
Bye.